Evan Mercer didn't think much of the envelope at first. It was sitting innocently enough in his mailbox, nestled between a pizza flyer and a monthly energy bill, cream-colored, embossed with the gold seal of the Ash Grove Hills Homeowners Association. He carried it inside along with the rest of the mail, set the stack on his kitchen counter, and opened it without ceremony. Then he froze. His eyes scanned the letter once, then again, and then a third time. The words swam slightly, disbelief sinking deeper with each pass. They were fining him, not 100, not 500, $5,000. His mind rejected it outright. There had to be a mistake, but the words were printed clearly, typed without mercy. Violation of HOA architectural guidelines. Unauthorized modification, fine. $5,000. Evan's stomach churned. The letter went on to state that his backyard pergola, the one that had stood long before he ever moved in, did not meet the approved neighborhood standards. It needed to be removed or brought into compliance within 10 days. 10 days or further action would be taken. He dropped into a chair, the paper trembling slightly in his grip. The name at the bottom of the letter caught his eye. Karen Whitlow, board president. Of course it was. Everyone in Ash Grove Hills knew Karen. She walked the neighborhood 3 times a day with a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. She once reported a 12-year-old for selling lemonade without a permit. Residents mostly stayed quiet, not because they liked her, but because they were afraid to be noticed. Evan hadn't played that game. 2 months ago, he stood up at a community meeting and questioned a string of fines issued across the neighborhood. He asked if there was a review system. Karen had smiled thinly, said he shouldn't worry about things that don't concern him, and moved on. But her eyes had lingered, like she was filing him away, and now, here it was. Retaliation, dressed in regulation. Evan stood up slowly, marched to the sliding door, and stared out at the pergola in his backyard. It was solid cedar, weathered just enough to show age, still standing proud with vines curling around its posts. Nothing about it had changed. It had been there in the real estate photos when he bought the house. He hadn't built it. He hadn't touched it. He grabbed his phone, scrolled through his saved photos, and pulled up the original listing. There it was, the pergola, intact. Years before he signed a single paper. He opened the HOA bylaws next. Nothing. No clause requiring retroactive design approval unless modifications were made. None of it made sense. It was never about the pergola at all. Karen wanted him quiet. Instead, she declared war. An hour later, Evan had already emailed the HOA office a formal challenge. He CC'd the property management company, attached copies of his documentation, and requested a hearing with the board. He wasn't going to roll over. Not for Karen, not for anyone. As night fell, he opened a new document on his laptop titled HOA Retaliation Timeline. He began listing everything: dates, statements, documents. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. A sharp knock at the door broke his concentration. He opened it cautiously. No one was there, but taped to his door was another envelope. This one unsealed, hand-delivered. No name, just a single sheet of paper inside. Watch your step, Mercer. Some fines aren't about rules. He looked up and down the darkened street. For the first time since moving into Ash Grove Hills, Evan realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about control. Evan didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk in the dark, staring at the typed note he'd found taped to his door. The words repeated over and over in his mind like a siren. Some fines aren't about rules. The shadows outside felt heavier than usual. It wasn't paranoia. Someone had hand-delivered a warning. Someone didn't want him digging deeper. By morning, he had reviewed every line of the HOA guidelines twice. He couldn't find a single rule he'd broken. No clause backed the fine. No article justified the amount. And yet, Karen had signed it with full authority, confident that he'd either pay or shut up. He wasn't doing either. Evan walked the neighborhood after sunrise, just a quiet loop, keeping his eyes open. People nodded politely, waved. Some avoided eye contact entirely, but a few gave him something more subtle, brief looks, like they wanted to speak, but weren't sure they should. Fear lived here, not in obvious ways, but in the cautious way residents mowed their lawns at regulation height and parked their cars with military precision. And then there was Karen's house. Perfect landscaping, trimmed hedges cut with obsessive care, a no trespassing HOA taprolled sign posted beneath her surveillance camera. She had built her little empire with rules and citations. Everyone knew she controlled the board. What they didn't know was what else she controlled. Back home, Evan opened his email to find an automated message confirming his appearance at the upcoming HOA meeting. His appeal would be reviewed if Karen allowed it. Later that afternoon, a knock at the door startled him. This time, someone actually stood on the porch, an older woman, slight frame, sharp eyes behind oversized sunglasses. Evan Mercer, she asked. He nodded. I'm Dana Healy. I live on the east side. I heard about your situation. She hesitated. Mind if I come in? Evan led her to the living room, unsure what to expect. She sat without waiting for an offer and leaned in. You're not the only one she's fined unfairly, she said, but you're the first to push back. Evan's pulse kicked up. You're saying this happens a lot? She picks people she thinks won't fight. She's buried contractors, dog walkers, even a teenager who painted his mailbox without asking. Dana's lips pressed into a thin line. She hides behind policy. No one's had the time or money to challenge her. And the board? She controls them. Doug's her cousin. Marilyn lives in fear of being next. They vote. How she tells them to. Dana pulled something from her purse, a small flash drive. This has copies of board emails, phone recordings, surveillance screenshots from neighbors. She's been abusing her position for years. Nobody had proof. Until now. Evan took the flash drive slowly. Where'd you get this? I've been documenting things. Quietly, waiting for someone brave enough to do what I couldn't. She stood. You seem like that someone. As she left, Evan watched her disappear down the sidewalk like a ghost. Then he plugged the flash drive into his laptop. Inside was a folder labeled Karen Docs. The first file was an audio recording. Karen's voice, unmistakably sharp, snapped through the speakers. If he opens his mouth again, I'll fine him for the color of his curtains. I don't care if it's legal. I make the rules here. Evan sat back. There it was, the line she'd never thought would be recorded. She wasn't just bluffing. She was targeting him, and he finally had the match that could burn her empire to the ground. Evan listened to the recording again, then again. Each time Karen's voice sounded more venomous, more certain of her own untouchable authority. If he opens his mouth again, I'll fine him for the color of his curtains. She wasn't just bluffing. She had weaponized her role. This wasn't about HOA policies anymore. This was personal vendetta cloaked in procedure. And she thought she could get away with it because she always had. Evan backed away from the desk, heart pounding. The flash drive was loaded with more than just one smoking gun. There were dozens of files, PDFs of internal board communications, photos of Karen visiting properties late at night, and several recordings where she laughed about levying fines for fun. He didn't know how Dana had gotten her hands on this. He didn't care. He just knew what he had to do next. The HOA meeting was 4 days away. If he moved now, he could get ahead of her. That night, he emailed a lawyer. By the next morning, he had a consultation scheduled. But as the sun rose, so did something else, an unexpected shift in the neighborhood's energy. Evan noticed it while collecting his mail. Neighbors who had once avoided his gaze now lingered a little longer. A few even spoke. Hang in there, one muttered quietly. Some of us are with you. I hope you win, whispered another, glancing toward Karen's pristine yard. It was working. Karen's grip was slipping, even if she didn't know it yet, but she was catching on. That afternoon, Evan received another letter, hand-delivered again. No envelope, just a printed page shoved between his storm door and frame. Cease and desist your attempts to slander HOA authority. Further action will result in legal consequences. No signature, no letterhead, but he didn't need one to know it came from her. That night, Evan met with the attorney. Her name was Marla Costa, sharp, relentless, and with a streak of fire in her voice that Evan liked immediately. This Karen woman sounds like a dictator with a clipboard, she said as she flipped through the documents. And unfortunately, this kind of behavior isn't rare in homeowner associations. But what you've got here, this recording, the emails, this is different. This is malice, and that's actionable. She slid the flash drive into her laptop and listened to Karen's voice. By the time it finished playing, Marla was already drafting a strategy. We can file for injunctive relief. Stop her from enforcing anything further until this is resolved. And if you want to go after her personally, there's a path. Abuse of authority, intentional infliction of emotional distress, maybe even fraud if the fines haven't been documented properly. Evan exhaled slowly. How long would it take? Depends how loud you're willing to be. He met her eyes. Very loud. The plan was forming fast, but something still gnawed at him. That night, after returning home, Evan noticed something off. His pergola. One of the cedar beams had been cracked. Freshly, it hadn't fallen. It had been damaged. Deliberately. A clean break, near the base, like it had been kicked or hit with something heavy. He scanned the yard, eyes darting across the shadows. No one in sight. No cameras out back. No proof. Just the creeping certainty that someone had been on his property. Again, this wasn't just about policy anymore. Now it was personal on both sides. Karen had drawn blood, and Evan was done playing defense. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, Evan wasn't nervous. He was beyond it. Something had shifted in him. The night he found the beam on the pergola snapped like the last flicker of doubt had finally gone out. This wasn't just a battle over property. This was a reckoning. And he was walking into it prepared to burn bridges if it meant ending her reign. The Ashgrove Hills Community Hall was packed, far more than usual. Most meetings only drew the same 10 board residents. Tonight, there were nearly 50 standing room only, some even outside the windows, peering in. Word had spread. Evan walked in with Marla at his side. She wasn't just his legal backup, she was there to make a statement. No one brought a lawyer to an HOA meeting unless things were about to go sideways. At the front of the room sat the board. Karen, as always, was dead center, her posture rigid, lips drawn into a thin line. Doug to her left, pretending to check his notes. Marilyn on her right, nervously twisting a pen between her fingers. Karen raised the gavel. We'll begin tonight's meeting with an appeal hearing brought by Mr. Evan Mercer, she said, her voice hard and formal. Mr. Mercer has been fined for a code violation, and Evan stood before she could finish. Actually, I'd like to begin by entering a statement into the record. He held up a flash drive. This contains evidence of misconduct by this board, including recorded audio of you, Miss Whitlow, admitting to targeting me and other residents for personal reasons. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes flicked toward Doug, then narrowed back at Evan. This is highly irregular. Marla stepped forward. It's also entirely legal and necessary. Because this isn't just an appeal, Miss Whitlow, this is a formal notification of pending legal action against you and the Ashgrove Hills HOA for abuse of authority, targeted harassment, and falsified enforcement. Karen's jaw clenched so tightly Evan thought it might crack. I'll ask you to remove yourself, she said, voice rising. This is a private administrative meeting. No, Evan replied evenly. This is a public forum governed by the HOA Charter, which mandates resident access and allows official grievances to be voiced in person. Section 3.9. I've read it. Have you? Whispers surged through the room. Karen's composure fractured just for a second, then something unexpected happened. From the back, a hand shot up. It was Ms. Healy. I'd like to speak in support of Mr. Mercer, she called out. I was fined $800 for having potted plants too close to the sidewalk. Karen told me I could make it go away if I donated to the landscaping committee. On the other hand, I was told my Christmas lights were too bright. A man near the wall said. When I asked for clarification, Karen said if I made trouble, she'd dig through my home purchase file. Karen slammed the gavel. Enough. This is out of order. But no one was listening to her anymore. Voices rose, some angry, some wounded, all emboldened. I was fined for a garden gnome. She said I needed HOA permission to put a swing on my porch. She threatened to foreclose on my house for leaving a trash bin out. Karen stood, knocking over her chair. This is a hostile takeover attempt. Marla's voice cut through the room. No, Ms. Whitlow, this is a neighborhood waking up. Karen looked round and saw it too. The faces, the people she'd silenced. For years, all staring back, not with fear, but fury. And then Evan stepped forward one last time. You fined me $5,000 for something I didn't do, he said. But you just gave me something far more valuable. He paused. A crowd and a cause. Karen didn't resign. Of course she didn't. The meeting ended in chaos, residents shouting, board members whispering furiously, and Karen storming out without another word. But that wasn't defeat. It was retreat. And Evan knew better than to think she'd give up. She wasn't done. By morning, retaliation arrived like a brick through a window, only quieter, colder, more calculated. A notice was taped to his door again, this time from the Compliance Enforcement Subcommittee. A new violation. Evan stared at it, stunned. Excessive backyard lighting disturbing neighborhood ambience. Fine. $1,000. Evan's backyard had a single string of solar lights under the pergola, the same lights he'd left up since winter. But suddenly, they were a problem. He laughed bitterly. It wasn't even creative anymore. Karen wasn't trying to look legitimate. She was sending a message. He texted Marla, who responded within minutes. Document it. Photograph everything. I'll file a restraining motion to suspend further enforcement. Evan spent the next 2 hours cataloging every inch of his backyard. He even filmed a nighttime walkthrough with a light meter app to prove the absurdity. It was pathetic, but it was working. Karen was flailing, and when people flail, they get reckless. The first neighbor showed up at Evan's door that afternoon. Then a second. By nightfall, 7 more had come forward, each holding their own stack of violations, some recent, some years old, fines for unapproved patio chairs, wind chimes, planters visible from the sidewalk. The list went on. They weren't asking for help, they were offering it. We're in, one man said. Whatever you're doing, we want to be part of it. Evan didn't have a plan for a movement, but now he had one anyway. They called themselves the Fair Oaks 10, even though by the next day, the number had doubled, then tripled. Evan's kitchen became a headquarters. Every inch of his dining table was covered in document copies of fines, HOA letters, time-stamped photos, screen grabs of text threats, evidence of a broken system designed to protect one woman's power. It was bigger than a lawsuit now. It was war, and Karen felt it closing in. Evan came home from the grocery store 2 nights later to find his garage door stuck halfway open, jammed. Something was caught in the track when he inspected it. He found it wasn't a mechanical issue. Someone had stuffed a wooden paint stirrer jammed with glue into the runner, on purpose, not the kind of thing that could be proved unless he caught them in the act. The police report he filed felt like a formality. They took it seriously, but Evan saw it in their eyes. No cameras, no witnesses, no suspect. All they could do was log it, and if Karen was behind it, she'd be careful. But then something changed. Late that night, Evan got an email. Subject: confidential. You need to see this from anonymous@protonmail.com. Attached was a photo, blurry but unmistakable. Karen standing in a driveway that wasn't hers, looking directly into a Ring doorbell camera. holding a clipboard. Midnight Tea, IMESTAMP. The house. A resident who had just joined the Fair Oaks 10. Another attachment followed. A spreadsheet, a list of every fine Karen had issued in the last 4 years. And next to it a second list, Karen's personal notes. Evan scrolled down. Next to his name. Big mouth needs silencing. He stared at it. Proof, not just petty tyranny. Harassment, written in her own hand. Whoever sent this knew more than they were saying. And suddenly, Evan understood something chilling. Karen hadn't just made enemies. She had someone inside her circle, ready to betray her. Evan didn't sleep. That night. The spreadsheet glowed on his screen like a confession in neon. Names, fines, notes, all dripping with Karen's contempt. She hadn't just been vindictive. She'd been strategic. Some residents were labeled quiet, others timid. A few marked watch or warn. But it was the ones labeled silence or threat that sent a chill down Evan's spine. Next to one woman's name was a single word. Evict. He cross-referenced it with Dana Healy. It matched. Evan stared at the photo from the Ring doorbell. Karen in the dark. Clipboard in hand like a weapon. What was she doing at someone's home at midnight? Issuing fines by moonlight. Or worse. The anonymous email address had no traceable signature, but whoever sent it had access to Karen's files, things no resident should have seen, which meant one thing. Someone close to her was turning. But who? By morning, Evan had forwarded the documents to Marla, who replied in all caps. She's done. This is enough for civil harassment and HOA code abuse. Let's go public. He agreed. That afternoon they launched a private website, ASHGROVEuncovered.com. Within hours, dozens of residents had logged on. The site included Karen's fine list, the Ring image, audio clips from the flash drive, and a secure form to submit testimonials. They called it The Ledger, and it grew fast. But Evan wasn't prepared for what happened next. A car pulled up outside his house. He looked through the blinds. It was Marilyn. Board member. Nervous smile. Always quiet. She stood on his porch for almost 5 minutes before knocking. But when Evan opened the door, she looked up at him like someone who'd finally decided to jump. Sent the files, she whispered. He blinked. I can't do it anymore. She's gone too far. Evan, let her in, barely breathing. Marilyn sat with her purse on her lap like a child in the principal's office. She looked pale, eyes darting toward every sound. I didn't know at first. I really didn't. But she makes you complicit. She controls through fear. Doug's family, he'll never speak out. But I've had enough. You had access to the internal records. I was the secretary, she said. She made me keep notes, told me what to write. Half the violations she issued weren't even voted on. Evan leaned in. Why now? Marilyn swallowed. Because last week she said something. About you. She told me you needed to be neutralized. Before the meeting next month. That word, it scared me. She's unraveling. Evan felt it too. Karen was slipping, losing her grip. And like any tyrant, she'd lash out before she let go. Marla was thrilled when he told her. This confirms conspiracy within the board. If Marilyn swears an affidavit, we've got grounds for emergency intervention. The court can force a temporary freeze on all enforcement. We may even get her removed entirely. But Evan hesitated. Not out of doubt. Out of calculation. He had enough now to crush her quietly. File a lawsuit. Let the courts handle it. But Karen hadn't just broken rules. She'd humiliated people. Threatened them. Stalked them. Some deserved justice. Others deserved consequences. Evan stared at the flash drive. The audio clips. The notes. The midnight photo. Then he looked at the calendar. The HOA's annual community festival was 3 days away. A public event. Open mic. Local news often covered it. For fluff stories. And Karen always gave the opening speech. He turned to Marilyn. You want to help me make sure no one forgets what she's done? Marilyn paused, then nodded. The morning of the Ashgrove Hills Community Festival dawned bright and cheerful. The kind of golden spring day that made people forget there were cracks in the sidewalks or serpents in their HOA. Balloons flapped gently above the gates. Booths were half built by volunteers in matching t-shirts. And children chased each other across the green lawn with sticky fingers and wild laughter. But Evan wasn't there to celebrate. He stood near the pavilion, wearing a navy button-down and a neutral smile, his heart beating a steady rhythm of war. Drums. Marla was nearby, disguised as another helpful vendor mom, casually manning the community bake sale stand. Marilyn stood by the refreshments, nodding politely at Karen like nothing had changed. And Dana Healy. She was the one who'd slipped the USB stick into the sound booth technician's hand that morning. Right after asking if he could play a local awareness PSA over the main speakers. Everything was ready. Evan's laptop sat inside the information tent, open to the page he'd created just for today, www.karenwhitlowexposed.com. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't pretty, but it was clear. And at exactly 11:15 a.m., right as Karen stepped onto the stage to deliver her opening remarks, the website would go live, linked to every neighborhood Facebook group, every resident inbox, and just for flair, sent as an anonymous tip to a local investigative journalist who'd already expressed interest in HOA abuse stories. Karen adjusted the microphone stand. Squinting under the sun, she wore her usual pastel blazer, clipboard clutched against her chest like a breastplate. Her lips curled into a wide rehearsed smile. "Good morning, Ashgrove Hills," she called out, her voice amplified across the field. Applause rose, some genuine, some habit. She launched into her speech. Generic stuff. Pride in community, respect for tradition, appreciation for volunteerism. The crowd smiled, nodded, laughed politely. At 11:14 a.m., Evan nodded to the technician. 1 minute. Karen was just warming up. "And as your HOA president, I am committed to fairness, transparency, and above all, community harmony." The loudspeakers cut out with a soft click. Karen blinked, confused. Then, without warning, her own voice filled the air. "Not live. Recorded. If he opens his mouth again, I'll fine him for the color of his curtains." Gasps, murmurs. Someone dropped a cup. The audio kept going. Karen's voice, smug and sharp, tearing through her own image in front of hundreds of stunned residents. Clip after clip, mocking neighbors, admitting to retaliation, instructing others to ignore board votes. Karen froze. Her hands dropped the clipboard. Her eyes scanned the crowd. She looked for a lifeline and found only faces. Dozens, hundreds, all staring back, not confused, angry. Then came the image. The technician had flipped the projection. Screen behind her. There she was, caught, on the ring cam. Midnight clipboard, creeping through a neighbor's yard. Whispers rose like a tidal wave. Then shouts, "You trespassed on my property. Is that why I was fined last month? You told me the board voted. Was that a lie?" Karen stumbled backward, visibly trembling now. "This is illegal," she stammered. "You can't just this. Is harassment." Marla stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Already cleared. You're a public official, at a public event. We have evidence. We have witnesses. And we're suing you." Karen tried to speak again but found no words, only noise. Accusations, phones, recording, eyes judging. She backed off the stage, her perfect world crumbling beneath her heels. And Evan, he didn't say a word, he just watched her go. The woman who fined him $5,000 for a pergola, now facing something she'd never see coming, public humiliation. And tomorrow, the courtroom smelled like stale coffee and tension. Every seat was filled with residents from Ashgrove Hills, eager to see the queen of the HOA finally held accountable. Cameras from a local news crew stood silently in the back, recording what was rapidly becoming a story bigger than any neighborhood dispute. Karen Whitlow sat at the defendant's table, her usual armor stripped away. Her hair was pulled back tight, her blazer slightly rumpled, eyes darting nervously between the judge and Evan's legal team. The cold command she wielded for years was gone, replaced by a desperate, fragile facade. Evan sat with Marla beside him. But alert. He had prepared for months, gathering evidence, lining up witnesses, and building a case not just against Karen, but the entire toxic system she'd created. The judge cleared his throat, calling the case to order. From the start, it was clear the evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the midnight surveillance photos, the detailed ledger of fines tied to personal vendettas, each piece laid bare the pattern of abuse. Karen's attorney tried to dismiss the recordings as unauthorized, the photos as invasion of privacy, and the fines as standard HOA enforcement. But one by one, witnesses took the stand. Neighbors who testified about unjust fines, Marilyn's affidavit exposing internal conspiracies, even Dana's recounting of Karen's threats and intimidation tactics. When it came time for Karen to speak, she rose shakily, her voice barely above a whisper. "I only wanted to protect this community," she said. "I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but the damage was done." The judge leaned forward. "This court finds that Ms. Whitlow abused her position of power for personal reasons, violated the rights of several homeowners, and exceeded the authority granted by the Ashgrove Hills HOA by." Karen's face went pale. The ruling ordered her immediate removal from the board, a formal public apology, and damages payable to the residents affected, including Evan's $5,000 fine refunded with interest. But that wasn't all. The judge mandated a full review of the HOA's policies and procedures, appointing a temporary independent committee to oversee future operations. As the gavel struck, a mixture of cheers and relieved sighs echoed through the courtroom. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Evan answered questions calmly, crediting the neighborhood's courage. "I'm just one of many who finally said enough," he said. "This is about fairness, respect, and the right to live without fear of retaliation." Days later, Ashgrove Hills began to heal. The community garden blossomed, the streets buzzed with new energy, and residents started speaking openly again. But the biggest surprise came 2 weeks after the verdict. Evan received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed, "You were right. Not everyone who watches is silent. Not everyone who fears is weak. Thank you for giving us hope." Signed only with a small symbol, a simple, blacked-out I. Evan smiled. He folded the letter carefully and looked up at the pergola, its beams, sturdy and unbroken just like the neighborhood's spirit. Because sometimes, one person's fight can change everything.